Thank you again. So this event was all due to the Alumni Relations Office. If you guys could give them a big round of applause, please. Thank you, Caesar and Bernice and Lori. She could not make it, but all this food, all the setup was all due to them. So thank you again to them. All right.
All right, well, thanks for joining us. So just to reiterate the Blockchain Club's vision, so we want to be a globally recognized blockchain catalyst. So not just like in Boston, but kind of like globally, because blockchain is, it is global and it is international. And our mission is basically to focus on education, first and foremost, as well as kind of like getting hands-on experience and really kind of like letting you guys kind of participate in a lot of these blockchain ecosystems and activities. Do you want to just go to the next slide? So to introduce the team, I'm David Hsu. I'm one of the co-presidents and co-founder of the club. And then we got Bennett Thompson, who's my other co-president, Jack Miller, who's our director of events, Jeremy Koch back there, who's director of research, Allison Liu, who's our VP, Yvonne Rosales back there, who's our director of research. We have some like board changes for next semester, so we've got Ekin, who's our co-director of marketing, Bernice back there, who's our other co-director of marketing, Alex Groner, he's up at the front desk, he's our director of finance, and Nolan right there, he's our director of tech, and yeah, that's all. So for fall, we had a ton of events, 21 speakers, 7 alumni speakers, and we've got 5 student startups right now that are kind of like building blockchain applications. Like next semester, we're gonna try to do more of like a sort of like education plus speaker split. So kind of like get ready for that.
So we also had 2 research teams this semester. You can go talk to them. Both their booths are back there. One group did digital identity, so they wrote a long research paper that will be published tomorrow on our LinkedIn. And then another group did some work on smart contracts on Bitcoin, and also did some Medium posts on DeFi. So definitely, if you haven't already, go talk to the teams after the little speaker event. And we also have a wallet set up, and you can mint your first or free NFT. So if you haven't done that already, please go check it out.
Yeah, so for next semester, we're gonna Block Bash, which is kind of like our research team. We're gonna do more of that. So please, if you're interested in kind of doing research, that's basically just kind of like doing deep dives on stuff or writing your articles, like feel free to sign up on that, and we highly encourage it. Education, so we're gonna bring on a director of education, and basically it's gonna be like a semester-long course, and you're gonna kind of like come in, we're gonna dive into various topics on blockchain and cryptocurrencies to really like build like a strong foundation for setting you guys up to succeed in this field. And then governance, we're actually really excited about this. We recently partnered with Andreessen Horowitz. They're basically like giving us governance tokens to vote on their behalf. So we're participating in the governance of FEI, which is an algorithmic stablecoin, and we expect to do like more of this stuff with other venture capital firms. So we're creating a team around that. So if you're interested in that too, please like let us know, and we'll get you guys involved.
So with that, that's our summary of the blockchain event for this fall. So if you guys want to come up, we can get started. So you guys can give a round of applause. You guys just want to start with brief introductions and like what you studied at Northeastern and when you graduated? You can just get down the line.
Hi everyone, I'm Sydney Rice. I graduated from Northeastern in 2018, and I studied math and economics. I'm currently a product lead at a startup called Talos, and I've been working in the crypto space for the last 3 years and been like personally involved in blockchain and crypto for 5 years.
Hi everyone.
Hi everyone, my name is Felipe Cortes. So I'm a finance PhD. So my background was economics, now it's finance. When I was in the PhD, I focused on game theory. So from there I did kind of a jump to blockchain. I will explain later. My research is corporate finance, nothing related to blockchain, but recently I'm part of the coordinating all the initiative of like the fintech offered by the McCune School of Business, and as part of that I will be teaching the blockchain course, or I'm teaching the blockchain course. So I've been at Northeastern for 8 years now. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Toju. I graduated from Northeastern in 2016 from the McCune School of Business, and I studied marketing and entrepreneurship. I've been working in the blockchain space for about 4 years now, primarily as a writer and researcher. Most recently, I helped to write a course on blockchain technology that was taught at Oxford University. And I'm also currently a content strategist at Horizon, which is a blockchain company that provides basically the ability to create your own blockchain network to design any type of business idea you want, focused on Web3. So, yeah.
So I don't know, these are amazing people, amazing speakers, and all went to Northeastern and kind of found their way to blockchain. I don't know, one of my favorite questions to ask people in the space is, what was that defining moment that you kind of went down the rabbit hole, or like first learned about crypto or blockchain, and I don't know, just went down the rabbit hole from there. So we'll go opposite way this time.
So I first heard about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin probably around 2014, and I think the context had to do with Silk Road, so didn't really resonate with me. And then 2017, it was more about the speculation and the ICO bubble and everything like that. But then early 2018, a friend of mine started building some blockchain projects in Nigeria, focused on digital identity, digitizing real estate and land records, and I started to see all the real use cases that could come out of this technology, and it resonated as something that was more than just an asset class for speculation. And so in an effort to kind of help contribute to that project, I started researching and doing a lot of my own work and contributing to various different crypto publications, and I just kind of found my own path in that space, and that's really when I started seeing the value and getting into the industry.
So my interest is purely academic, of course. So again, my background is game theory, and in game theory we have a bunch of results that basically tell us that it's impossible to achieve some consensus in some scenarios. So when I first saw what Bitcoin was doing, Satoshi's paper, so that was like the first spark in my head, this is something that it's an impossibility theorem that has been there for 100 years, and now all of a sudden it's working. So I just wanted to understand what was the magic. The more I started reading, of course, I started with Bitcoin because that was the first massive application of this. So the more I read, the more I understood that there is a lot of economics and finance behind it, even though it's not at the surface, you don't see it. So that was the first approach. And the second thing is, of course, teaching in Northeastern for 8 years. Every single time I have students with some scary faces, oh, Bitcoin is crashing, what do we do? Oh my God, I lost the money, So I felt some sense of duty, as a professor, I need to basically get more involved to see, what is exactly, what is the source of stress for students, and here I am.
So I was, I think the math club at Northeastern had a session where we walked through the proof of work algorithm for Bitcoin on the cryptography side. So that kind of first got my interest around I just kind of like the idea about ciphers and things like that. So I started going to a bunch of the Boston blockchain meetups and the MIT Bitcoin Club in Boston with some friends and family members, and it was just kind of nice to have an immediate community to talk about this stuff with. And so I then kind of from the economics angle during the ICO era was trying to understand token economic systems and incentives that way. And around the same time, was doing a co-op that had like a major data problem with a supply chain thing, and they couldn't trace it. And I was like, wait, this would be probably like an awesome use case for blockchain, and just kind of all these things converged at once. And I think I was like in the middle of interviewing for jobs in traditional like data science and business analyst roles, and I was like, no, this is too exciting. I'm gonna jump right into working in crypto.
Thanks for sharing, guys. Toju, I wanted to come back to you. Can you talk a little bit more about like the work of like crypto and blockchain in Nigeria? I think we all kind of get so caught up in like the bull and bear cycle and just like trying to make a profit off of like different ICOs and different like cryptocurrencies like Shiba and Squid or Squid Games or whatever it might be. But I think it's really interesting to kind of look outwards at other countries and see where like the real utility of blockchain is actually playing a part, instead of just looking at the financial incentives and the get rich quick schemes we kind of all want to experience, right?
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I think one of the most important use cases that I've seen for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general is as a way to hedge against inflation, particularly in economic systems where you have currencies that are controlled by central banks, and you have these situations like in Nigeria, for example, where the inflation rate is almost 30% or more per year. And I have family back home where the currency is being devalued consistently, and so they don't really have access to dollars in the same way that we do and other countries do. And so Bitcoin has acted as really a hedge against inflation and as a way to get access to other currencies that are more stable. And so that's been the first use case that a lot of people have gravitated towards in countries like Nigeria, and another famous examples like Venezuela, where it's even worse. They have hyperinflation over there. And so that's been a critical use case. And another important thing to observe in countries in Africa is the use of smartphone technology and the rise of fintech and how that's been adopted, where people's entire banking infrastructure is on their phone. And so that just makes it an easy link to cryptocurrencies, because they don't necessarily have access to traditional banking system. So they need their own ability to leverage a savings account, the ability to send money across the world, and particularly when it comes to remittances, and you have this inexpensive method for sending money. And so I think when it comes to payments, store of value, those are some key use cases that I've observed. And it's one of those things that is really turning into a kind of soft infrastructure, where in the absence of the proper banking system, cryptocurrencies are serving as a way for people to really access financial services, and then on other things like digital identity and healthcare, and it's really becoming a really critical aspect of that economy.
Thanks, Toju. If anyone has any questions about that, we'll have open Q&A here towards the end. So always an interesting topic to kind of do a deep dive into. Kind of switching it back, can you guys all talk about like what you're currently working on, and kind of like the impact you see it having, or like who your customers are, I don't know, who you're trying to impact, and whatever other things you might want to add?
Yeah, so I'm, like I said earlier, I'm currently a product lead for a company called Talos, and I recently started there. My last couple of years in this space has been focused on kind of getting institutions involved in it. I started out early on at a crypto exchange called Poloniex that Circle owned, and got a lot of like exposure to how it was impacting the retail side, and I thought that was great. I wanted to be able to access this. I wanted all my friends to be able to access it, but we need kind of the institutions to layer in and be able to build tools and give us the access the way companies like PayPal and Square or Block and everyone else are doing for us. And so I recently was working in consulting, providing kind of like that strategic vision for these companies, and then also helping them with all the layers on top of that, like compliance and market access and custody, and like the nuances are insane, and it's not fair for us all to have to access this the way that like it was meant to be. So if we can build trust for the institutions, using it, then it'll make it a lot easier for this kind of global domination of crypto and blockchain. So right now at Talos, we have a lot of big kind of investing firms, retail, financial institutions, banks that we provide kind of open access to crypto markets. Currently, it's mostly like the spot markets, derivatives, and we're getting into the future space as well, but we're hoping to kind of be, a layer so that they can access DeFi, or they can access kind of anything that's like approaching in Web3, whether it's tokenized securities or holding, real estate NFTs or something like that as well. So, mostly institutional right now, but in my spare time, I do a lot of stuff with decentralized identity, mining, and all that sort of like on-chain stuff that kind of pops up and is super exciting to me.
Thank you. So I speak from a different perspective, of course, but I guess my first goal is to basically demystify the whole blockchain thing. So one thing that, being a finance PhD, being a finance professor and working in some financial industry, so one thing that we suffer in finance is this jargon. Like sometimes when we go crazy with the jargon, sometimes it's easy to understand each other. With blockchain, I think it's even worse, because on top of the finance, you have to add all the computer science cryptography stuff. So sometimes when you hear these interviews, it's like a different language. And it's daunting at first, isn't it? So when you have a student that wants to learn blockchain, but then you have a speaker that is talking to you nonsense because you don't get anything. So again, it's tough. And I think the first impact that I want to make is it's basically trying to put everything in the easiest term possible, and it's to show that understanding the technology is not by itself difficult. Understanding the inner workings is not difficult. So that's I think the first objective my first goal. The second goal is, of course, and again this is goal Toju and Sydney are mentioning, which is so from a finance perspective, I think what is the most important is knowing the applications. What are the capabilities of the technology that we're learning here? No. So of course, not everything is as bright as we know. There are many issues with the technology still, that still needs to be developed. But if for example, I take a random Northeastern student that is interested in blockchain, I think the first question that they should ask is, well, let me think about, so now that I have a grasp of what blockchain can do, then let me think about the financial problem to basically use blockchain to solve that financial problem. And I think that is the second objective that I have in my mind, at least to make an impact in what I teach.
Can you talk a little bit about your blockchain course for next semester?
Yes. So I'm in charge of teaching for the first time the blockchain course at the business school. It's going to be offered in spring. So the course, of course, the first part of the course has to talk about cryptography, because that's the foundation, no? But again, I'm not going to go the objective is not to understand hash functions from the beginning to the end. It's just simply understanding, hey, there is something called cryptography, this is how it works, and this is how it's applied. So I'll explain of course, Bitcoin, Ethereum, then some protocols, and then we're going to close with some decentralized finance, basically discuss application, because I think this is, for the business school student, I think that's the most important aspect of the use of blockchain.
So like I mentioned, the company I work for is called Horizon, and what it is essentially is a zero-knowledge enabled network of blockchains. So I'm going to break that up very cleanly so it's a lot easier to understand. So why do you need a network of blockchains? If you think about blockchains today, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, they all exist in some different level of trying to solve the scalability trilemma, where a blockchain is essentially trying to be secure, decentralized, and scalable at the same time. And there's always a trade-off. You always have to trade off one for the other. And Ethereum's entire thing is that it's meant to be an infrastructure for developing decentralized applications. But what tends to happen, and what we've seen, is that as more network congestion occurs when you have people using Ethereum, whether they're trading on DeFi applications or NFT applications. It leads to high gas fees, and it's ultimately not as scalable. And so what Horizon tries to do is say, rather than having multiple decentralized applications run on one blockchain, you as a developer can actually run your own blockchain, and you can actually run multiple blockchains that are interoperable, meaning connected with each other and connected to like a main chain, essentially. And what this provides is the ability to have customization. You can design your own consensus mechanism, whether it's proof of work, proof of stake, or you can also design how fast you want your blockchain to be, and also make it privacy preserving. So that's where the zero knowledge component comes in. And anyone who's familiar with zero knowledge proofs, what it is essentially is a way to prove that a statement is true without revealing any information about that statement. So you can actually have people sort of confirm transactions within a private blockchain without revealing the details externally to a public blockchain that you're connected to. And all this is essentially enabled to have privacy and also like scalability. So that's essentially what it is. And really the whole purpose of this project, Horizon, is to provide an easier path for whether it's traditional companies, developers who want to build DeFi applications, NFTs, whatever your particular use case is, you can have a blockchain for that particular use case. And so you have full customization and control over your application, and that just allows you to sort of explore new avenues in the blockchain realm. So that's ultimately the goal of Horizon.
Great, thanks guys for sharing. Kind of taking a step back from like out of the professional lives, are there any like favorite projects that you have, or like favorite like parts of blockchain that might be self-sovereignty or DeFi, or like what are you currently watching, or what kind of news sources do you pay attention to? I think there's a lot of like misinformation out there, also like rug pulls and different scams. Like how do you kind of stay away from that, or like what advice do you have for students or people that are new to the industry? Just try to learn and see what's actually not noise in the industry.
So for news and stuff in general, I'll plug my favorite podcast, as Spotify Unwrapped just told me to, is On the Brink by Castle Island. They just like really cover all aspects of this space. It's super educational, really interesting. If you're looking to easily get into this too, just dip your toe into crypto Twitter. It's like a whole crazy world, but you learn so much. There's like Twitter spaces going on all the time, and just kind of like staying plugged in with things like that are happening. It really is overwhelming to kind of like step into it. And this week I am super into NFTs, and last week I was super into DeFi. Like you just kind of have to bop around, I think. It probably if you looked at my Twitter feed and looked at what I was interested in that week, they probably aligned. But I think, as you kind of like start like trying this stuff, that's how it becomes easiest to, access it. So buying an NFT and then going on something like Dune Analytics to see like how that smart contract works can just kind of lead you down a rabbit hole of this stuff. So I think, project-wise, there's so much going on. There's so many cool companies out there. I can't think to plug any right now. But in the decentralized identity space, like there's a bunch of really cool people. I can't wait to read the paper that's coming out tomorrow from you guys. And there's a really great report that just came out from Masari on their 2022 trend, or look back on last year, trends and predictions for next year. Just so much content, and don't get overwhelmed by it. Kind of stay in your own lane, and buy some ETH on Coinbase or BlockFi or something, and then set it up with your MetaMask wallet and try things out. That's kind of my general advice.
So again, I think one challenge is that so we are being as of now we're being bombarded with like information about crypto assets, cryptocurrency, blockchain from different sources. Yes, And the challenge is that if there is one person that wants to enter the space, how to better process all of that information in an efficient way. Because it goes like, it's kind of a random walk. So that I think is the first challenge. So makes it intimidating, but again, like it is not. So I think the most useful, so once a student have a framework of understanding what blockchain is, then all of this becomes like a second order concern. So my first, I mean, I don't know how to put it, but my first advice, I guess, is do not be like there shouldn't be any stage fright because you open newspapers and I have no idea what it's saying. It's a slow process, but one can make it. I'm not going to say it's easy, of course, no, but it's going to take time and it's doable. The second thing, and again, goes back to basically how to understand like what is going on out there is, and this is an advice that I give to students in my class, is the easiest way for you to learn like these uses and applications of blockchain is take a look at the newspaper. So for example, every day take a look at Bloomberg. And every single day there are like 3 or 4 articles on some application of crypto, some application of blockchain, that it's enlightening. So for example, today there was an article on layer 2, which is simply like another way to make like blockchain faster, no? There is an issue with blockchain, as Toju said, which is like scalability, no? So if we compare like, for example, Bitcoin or Ethereum to what Visa is doing or like MasterCard is not like, we're not there yet. So, but now there are like new developments, and how do you learn like these new applications of blockchain, like the twist of the industry is basically by reading the newspapers. And I think there is a lot of value to doing that. So I think these are the two advices that I would give you if you want to enter that space.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's definitely interesting. So since I basically started in the crypto space as like almost like a journalist, really, I started writing a lot of different articles. So I know there are a lot of sources out there, from CoinDesk to Cointelegraph to Bitcoinist, where you can learn a lot about what's happening in the space, and also kind of learn about blockchain 101, Bitcoin 101. I think the big thing that's missing now for people who are just entering the space is that they're not getting a sense of the full chronological order of things. They're just getting in NFTs first, which is like, the final stage, really. Like NFTs without context, I'm not even sure how blockchain makes any sense, to be honest with you. I think, going back to the very beginning, Bitcoin, and looking at Bitcoin as like almost like this single architecture, single use case project, and then Ethereum is like a single architecture, multiple use case projects, and then you have like these other projects like Cosmos, Polkadot, which Horizon as multiple architectures, multiple use cases. And like I said, going back to the scalability trilemma, it's always been something that I've stuck to as like a key way to frame what all these other projects are doing and why they exist. And it's something that helps me, as well as obviously news sources like crypto Twitter. I mean, I basically live on crypto Twitter. It's just where all the information is, combined with various different podcasts and learning a lot about how the researchers and people in the crypto VC world, whether it's Paradigm, whether it's A16Z, all the various different VCs that are really trying to educate people about where these things fit. And one other thing I'll mention also is that a lot of this is technology, but it's also narrative as well. There's different narratives that are playing around, particularly around how to build, like the most scalable blockchain or the most, the largest blockchain network. Because a lot of these projects, whether it's like a Solana, Ethereum, Avalanche, they're trying to get more developers and more users to join their network, because that's how they succeed through network effects. And so being able to understand and pay attention to those narratives and sort of see how these projects are positioning themselves is something that I think is really valuable. And a lot of that comes from sources like crypto Twitter and following different people who either work on those projects or report on those projects. And so yeah, that's the advice I'd give.
Thanks, guys. Kind of switching paces to looking ahead. Can you just talk about like what you're excited for in the next like 5 to 10 years? Whether it's like your companies or like other ideas and interests you might have.
I'm really excited about the Metaverse because of the fact that I think what we're seeing here is like almost this sort of like decoupling from the traditional economy, where you have the ability to set up, to buy land, digital land, you know, set up a house. You can trade different digital assets based on that initial infrastructure, and all of that can happen without any connection to anything that's happening in the real world. So it's kind of this very fascinating thing where you have this entirely parallel economy that's being set up on like the sandbox, on Decentraland. And I think you're going to start to see a lot of jobs come up from that, a lot of opportunities, you know, because people are really building their own universes over there. And because of the blockchain, you actually have this ability for the first time ever to assign value to digital assets, like this digital scarcity. So things that, you know, could in previous versions, like just regular games, for example, you could always sort of duplicate, you know, an asset, but in blockchain you can verify that this particular asset within a game is unique and there's only 10 of them. And what makes it even more interesting is now that you have interoperability, you can sort of trade gaming assets across different games. So it becomes this sort of like universal thing that you can move from one universe to the next. And I just think that whole thing is really fascinating, and it sort of has this ability to be uncapped in terms of like, you know, limitations. So like, what is the GDP of the metaverse? It could be unlimited because it's just, you create new universes and new worlds. And so that's what I find really exciting. And so yeah, I'm really excited to see how that develops in the next 5 to 10 years.
So there are like my, I don't know, geek side, which is there is this old, so when I was learning this, like the basics of cryptography, so the whole principle is that it's possible to crack the cryptography, but it's unfeasible. So it's very difficult to do it, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. So with the new development of like the quantum computing and all that stuff, so it just makes me wonder, like what happens, for example, if we rely on this, like the existing cryptography, and one day someone breaks the cryptography, you know? Again, just like food for thought, you know? But again, I don't know how far we are. I'm not in that field, but when I read the news that like the US and China have like a super amazing computer that basically quantum computing, whatnot, so that raises some ideas. The second thing, like more serious, is I think, and this is similar to what Toju said, so this blockchain, so to me, one of the most important applications of blockchain is payments. And so in economics, we have this whole like literature on banking, the unbanked, which is there is a lot of financial exclusion in, like, if you move outside the US, you will see it. So the question is, how do we make, so it's always well for improving to make methods of payment accessible to everyone. So this is something that surprisingly it's not that developed yet. So we have some fintech, M-Pesa is like the typical example that happened in Africa, for example, but it's I think it's still nascent, and I think there is a lot of opportunities. I'm from South America. And in South America, we have only a few applications that are still very small. So there is a lot of room to, like, for grow, and I think that's something that I look forward to being developed in a massive scale. So.
Depending on the timeline, I think the self-sovereignty stuff will be huge. I would love the idea that, you know, I control my own information, my own data, all of that, and, you know, it doesn't seem that far off, especially when you start thinking of how we already have like these digital profiles that instead Google owns every app, you know, everything I log into and all the emails I get and whatever. So I think that's like, it's becoming a really scary problem, which will make it a really exciting solution. And it, you know, just kind of give us complete kind of access to this world as well. I think then that kind of rolls into like the metaverse stuff, which really excites me because I think that's going to be the way that we all find it easier to participate in this. I mean, right now, like, not everyone knows, you know, Solidity, or knows how to use a block explorer, or knows why addresses are formatted a certain way. Like that stuff's really complex. And so as we can kind of like use the tools that the technology is built to make it more kind of usable in your day-to-day, like if you think of the way that like we all had like Webkins and Neopets and like that kind of world, like we didn't know the technology going on behind it. Now we have like real use cases for this stuff, and it's like real money, and we can gamify it a little bit, but like it's now kind of completely like usable and accessible, and we're not sitting here talking about like you should go read the Bitcoin white paper, because like now we kind of can completely understand it, which you should go read the Bitcoin white paper if you haven't. That's a really good step one in this space. So I think in fully encompassed, I can have my own access to my own data, my own information, and then I can interact with people in this way. And whether it's anonymous or not for regulatory reasons, like it'll still be cooler than big tech kind of owning it.
Thanks, guys. I don't know. I was in Miami last week for Decentraland, and I was talking to a bunch of people. Like, there's a bunch of Metaverse stuff going on. It's not really something that I've really been plugged into. But one guy I was talking to, he's like, what if you could download all your data off of Facebook, off of Instagram, off of a Snapchat, and kind of plug that into the Metaverse, right? So you're taking your identity from the real world and plugging it into kind of like a digital world, where you don't have to like recreate yourself. You can kind of bring your friends, your family, and kind of shove them into another economy online. So I don't know, I thought that was pretty interesting and not something that I had ever really thought about, kind of going down that rabbit hole. But I don't know if you're interested in that stuff. There's a lot that can be done, and kind of definitely we're still very early. Like everything we're talking about here today is super early on. So I give you guys all props for being out here tonight. But kind of like my last question before we go into open Q&A is, what advice do you have for students, professionals, Northeastern alumni that might be here with us tonight, of how they can get involved, whether it's being like a community manager, or I don't know, contributing, posting on Twitter? What advice do you have for students?
So first of all, I think, some people think you have to have like a computer science degree to work in this industry, and that's just like completely not true. I have known tons of people who are like self-taught coders who work in this space, and then there's people like me who came from like a semi-technical background. The first job I interviewed for was like a risk analyst, and they said, do you know what KYC is? And I was like, what does that stand for? And it's know your customer, but it's like huge in this industry, and like there's so much nuances and different terminology. I work with a lot of people who are not, totally bought into the world of crypto and blockchain, and they're just kind of like learning it as they go along. So definitely don't be like afraid to approach those kind of roles. I think one of the biggest things that when I've interviewed people is just like curiosity and interest. Like if you're gonna, be really excited about coming to work every day in this space, then that's huge. You don't have to be an expert at all. And, you can work in sales, you can work in marketing, you can work in, product development like me. I didn't even know that was like an option at some point to kind of like bridge the business side and the technical side. So that was super, I'm very thankful to have found that path for myself. I think also this industry is super receptive to people just kind of like posting their own stuff, their own research, their own questions. Seriously, like I keep talking about crypto Twitter, but like if you just put something out there, like there'll be someone who will help you. DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, really interesting stuff right now. There's all these kind of like Discord chats that you can just join, and people are learning together and asking questions. I'll plug this one. It's called the Witches DAO. It's like women in crypto, technology, hardware, software, and energy. And we have like a ton of little channels in there about people asking questions. We've put together like a cool starter guide and stuff. So definitely just get involved and just learn and be really like receptive. I think this is one industry where like there's literally no dumb question. Like don't think that anyone knows more than you know, and they might, and they'll teach you, and they won't make you feel dumb. That was really important to me. I thought traditional finance was super mansplainy, and this is way more approachable, and I love it.
Yes. So yes, exactly. So I mean that I would like to follow up on that. So it's one has this like this misconception that like if you want to work on crypto you have to have like a computer science degree. It's not the case necessarily. So of course it depends on how far you want to go. But my take on this is, and again from a finance perspective, is I care more. I mean, once you have like a basic understanding of what you can do, just go and move to the application. So for example, banks are now using like blockchain to originate loans. So of course you're too young for that, but like typically a mortgage takes like what, like 60 days to close, 45 days to close. Now with blockchain you can do it in like perhaps 1 or 2 days, and you can save a bunch of origination fees and whatnot. So these are the type of, I mean, so once you have, so I think to me it's important that you have an understanding of what blockchain can do at the most basic level, but never forget the finance, because finance is basically, ultimately what is going to be adding value here. Because you have the blockchain and the finance application, so never like, even though, so once you learn, I guess, blockchain, or like you're going to be fixating, and that's, I would say it's not the first best, but like one fixates on Bitcoin, Ether, whatever. So let me start like just trading crypto assets. It's way more than that, way more than that. So yes, it's, I don't know the name, sexy, fancy, I don't know, fashion, you name it, but it's way more than that. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So in terms of how to like without telling you to take my class, of course. So, but it's very important that once if you want to do this. So as Sydney said, if you take a look at the internet, there are like plenty of resources, like a lot of resources. Which ones are like honest, truthful, which ones are not, that's of course always difficult to tell. But it's easy, so I would say it's possible to learn like on your own, no? But it's important for you to have a framework. So, because how do you process a bunch of information? Like how do you, for example, it's like starting blockchain with NFT, like that will drive you crazy. Like it's going to be very difficult, no? So start, like, have a framework. Let's start with the basics. So Bitcoin, like Bitcoin was the first application. Let's see what Bitcoin does. Then what came next? Ether, so Ethereum. So let's see what Ethereum did, and so on. So that framework, I think it's very important. But because we are busy, because we just keep getting information, we don't have a time to sit back and like think like what is the thought process, what was the evolution. So I think never lose that. So always have that perspective. So
yeah, so I think the most important thing you can do to sort of accelerate your learning in this space is to write, particularly write from the standpoint of someone who's trying to explain this technology that you yourself are trying to learn to somebody else. When I started writing for crypto publications, I'd only learned about blockchain for about a month. And I had to explain what these different ICO projects were doing and read their white paper and try to digest it. And, you know, it just accelerates your ability to learn, because now you have to really learn it to the point where you can actually explain to somebody else and distill it into the most important points. And another thing I would say is the most important thing is to really understand not just what these things are, but why they matter. You know, because people will throw a lot of jargon at you and they won't really explain why. Like, why does this actual project exist, or why does this technology matter? Because if you can explain the why, that's what resonates with people more than the what. Because people will forget whatever buzzword or feature is in a project, but the why is the most important thing. So yeah, I think that's really important. And just, you know, Medium is a great outlet for writing articles. You want to just explain to yourself as a way to kind of put something out there. What is blockchain technology? What is it to you? How do you interpret it? What does this whole Web3 revolution mean to you? And then see how people give you feedback, and then sort of iterate based off from there. And there's so many projects that are looking for people who want to create content and be able to explain all this complex information, because trust me, all the people are like, there's so many developers that are so busy building, they have no time to explain how this stuff actually works. And so if you can actually go and talk to them and be willing to listen and learn, and then take what they have to say and explain to the regular audience, that's a hugely valuable skill set. So that's the most important thing I would say, is be the translator of this incredibly complex information to everyone else. And that's a great way to get into the space.
Thanks for sharing, guys. Yeah, I mean, we have a research team. If you want to work alone or work with other people, it's a great way to get started, and also meet other people in the club. But does anyone have any questions? Yeah, do you want to speak up? I don't know if you can try.
Actually, I have two questions. For Toju, your company Horizon, you talked about Ethereum having scalability issues. Where do you see Horizon showing value when Ethereum moves to Ethereum 2.0 and there's proof of stake and the scalability issue gets solved?
Yeah, so I guess the way that the scalability issue gets solved with Horizon is not necessarily by having a more scalable single blockchain, but by giving people the option to have multiple blockchains that can optimize for speed or for security or for decentralization. So while Ethereum 2.0 is going to be a proof-of-stake blockchain and will therefore be more scalable, it may still have the problem of being a single blockchain where it has so many different dApps and could run into a lot of the similar scalability issues. Whereas ultimately the scalability trilemma is not something that's solvable. What I was really meant to say by that is it's a trade-off, it's a permanent trade-off. And so Horizon gets around that by having the ability for you to create multiple blockchains that optimize one for security, one for speed, one for privacy, one for decentralization. And the fact that they're interoperable means that you can operate this network of blockchains as one blockchain. So at least from the consumer's perspective, there's like they're interacting with one blockchain that's optimized for all these various different trade-offs. So that's sort of how Horizon is solving that. And I think over time, most projects are going to gravitate towards that. Like Ethereum does have sharding, so they do have the ability to create different networks. And so I think that's going to be something interesting to see how people are able to sort of spin up different blockchains or applications on Ethereum. And in which case Horizon's other distinguishing factor is the privacy aspects, which I think is going to be really important moving forward. And also other things like the proof of work main chain, where our core blockchain is still really one of the most secure in the industry. So that's another sort of competitive advantage. Yeah.
Thank you. My second question was for Felipe. As studying economics and game theory, how do you come to value tokens that derive most of their value from the network effect, like meme tokens and tokens that really don't have any utility? Do you see that they're just a big waste of time, or do you think that they're like a more for people to buy and make money from because essentially no one's really winning, people are just trading money? Just do you have any thoughts about those?
So what you're asking is a very tough question, even more in a blockchain club. So from an economic perspective, so why does money have value? So it's like a social convention, no? Like tomorrow, for example, that if we all agree that tables are going to be like worth something, then of course, then tables will be like the mean of exchange, no? So again, like being kosher, like the fundamental economics. So in that, I would beg to differ with Toju. So I don't think that, for example, crypto assets can be called a currency simply because they are not, they don't keep the value. So again, that's my opinion only. Of course, we can differ. So, but like if you tell me I'm going to store my savings in Bitcoin, if Bitcoin crashes 20%, that's not a good like storage technology to some extent. Yes. So why? So there have been some studies that that have attempted to explain what are the cross-sectional returns, like how do we explain the cross-sectional variation of crypto assets. And surprisingly, most of it is hard to explain. There is no, so if we take, again, from an academic perspective, if you ask me, for example, hey, why is a company worth more than another? I can give you fundamentals, I can tell you it's because of size, growth opportunities, capex, and you name it, no? But with crypto assets, we're not there yet. It's very difficult. And again, this is, if you notice, I'm not calling it cryptocurrency, I'm calling it crypto assets, no? So calling it the currency, I think it's a very high bar, at least using the currency part. So I'm sorry to tell you, but I don't have any, like, I mean, I have my own, I cannot give you like an average effect in the sense like it's just my opinion only, almost speculation, but we don't have any, as of now, we don't have any cross-sectional determinants of like the value of crypto assets yet. So.
I love this discussion because it's something that I dealt with a lot in helping to write the Oxford course, dealing with a lot of economics professors and some very interesting debates around this, whether cryptocurrencies are indeed a currency, you know, the trace of money, whether it's a store of value, unit of account, and you know, all that classical definition. And you're right, it is not, according to the classical definition, it isn't, and it does sort of make this very interesting because people have adopted it as a store of value, even though the volatility makes it more of a tradable and speculative asset. Because store of value, the literal definition that it stores value, not that it appreciates or depreciates the value. And so it's an interesting thing to think about, and you know, people have to sort of make those decisions on their own. Is this something that I really want to store my wealth in, or is this something I want to speculate on to be able to grow my wealth? And you know, in regards to like the meme tokens and all those other things, I really think it's just an aspect of a side effect of this fact, the fact that money is now open source, or you know, crypto assets are now open source. The ability to create your own currency means that the market essentially drives the value, and narratives start to be the primary source of value, not necessarily fundamentals. And the way I see it is, you know, if even just 1% of people who buy Dogecoin or Shiba get into ETH, Bitcoin, or any of the other currencies, then it might be a net positive. I don't know, that's just kind of how I see it. So.
In my experience watching these trading kind of venues go around, there is really no correlation between how different coin values are going on and what's happening on chain at all. I did this project in my consulting role with a company called Coinmetrics, and it's a project they're working on called Ferrum, and it's a risk network monitoring kind of system. And so we were trying to do some case studies around, okay, if there's, you know, the problem with decentralized blockchains is there can be, you know, network incidents that are massive and could cause like huge price drops because like the allocation of where assets are disappears or the chain gets completely